My name is April, and I guess you could say my story started when I realized my parents never really believed in me. I'm 29 now, and I've been on my own for 12 years. It feels like a lifetime ago when I was 18, sitting in our cramped kitchen while Mom made dinner and Dad read his newspaper. "We need to talk about college," I had said, my acceptance letter from State University still clutched in my sweaty palm. I'd worked my ass off in high school to get decent grades, and I actually got in. Dad looked up from his paper with this tired expression. "April, honey, we've been over this. We just don't have the money. But I could get financial aid, and you could take out a loan to cover the rest." Lots of parents do that. Mom turned around from the stove, wiping her hands on her apron. "We've never taken out such loans in our lives, April. We're not about to start now, especially since we already have the mortgage to worry about." That was it, no discussion, no looking into options, nothing. Just a flat no that crushed every dream I'd been building. My younger sister Lucy was only 11 then, sitting at the table doing homework. She looked up at me with these big eyes, probably not understanding why I looked like I was about to cry. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Lucy breathe in the bed next to mine. We'd been sharing a room forever because our house was small, and I realized I couldn't stay there anymore. Not when they'd just thrown away my future like it was nothing. The next morning, I started looking for a job. I'd already been doing manicures for friends and even Mom sometimes. I was actually pretty good at it. I'd taught myself by watching YouTube videos and taking free online courses. It was something I genuinely enjoyed, the whole process of making someone's nails look perfect. Within a week, I'd landed a part-time job at a little cafe downtown and started doing nails for people on the side. I saved every penny I could, barely spending anything on myself. Lucy would ask me why I was always working, and I'd tell her I was saving up for something special. When I turned 19, I had enough money saved to rent a tiny studio apartment across town. It wasn't much, basically a closet with a kitchenette, but it was mine. Once I was settled in my own place, I enrolled in proper manicure courses at the local beauty school. It cost me most of my savings, but I knew it was an investment. I studied hard and got my certificate, then landed a job at a decent nail salon downtown. The work was steady, and I was good at it, really good. Clients started requesting me specifically, and my appointment book was always full. I worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7 when things got busy. While other girls my age were partying and figuring out their majors, I was building something real. After 2 years at the salon, I'd saved enough to rent a small space and go out on my own. It was terrifying and exciting at the same time. I spent weeks painting and decorating, making it look professional but welcoming. When I opened my doors, I had exactly 3 clients booked for the first week. But word spread fast. I was reliable, skilled, and I actually listened to what people wanted. Within 6 months, I was booked solid. I had to start turning people away because I couldn't handle the volume alone. That's when I started thinking bigger. I researched the beauty market in our city, driving around to different neighborhoods and checking out the competition. I found this area where there were hardly any good nail salons, lots of potential customers but nowhere decent for them to go. By the time I turned 25, I'd saved enough to lease a bigger space and hire 4 other nail techs. We had a grand opening that brought in more clients than we could handle. I was proud of what I'd built, especially knowing I'd done it all myself. I didn't talk to my parents much during those years. We'd exchange pleasantries at family gatherings, but there was always this tension. They'd ask how the nail thing was going, like it was just a hobby I'd eventually grow out of. Lucy and I stayed close though. She was 18 now and about to graduate high school. She was smart, way smarter than I'd ever been, and she had her sights set on this expensive private college with a great finance program. "I'm so excited, April," she told me over coffee one afternoon. "Mom and Dad are looking into loans and everything. They really want me to have the opportunities one deserve." I nearly choked on my latte. "Loans? They're taking out loans for your college?" "Yeah, isn't that great?" They said education is an investment and they want to support my dreams. I stared at her, remembering that conversation in our kitchen 7 years ago. The one where they told me they never took out loans, especially not with a mortgage to worry about. But here they were, ready to go into debt for Lucy's education. That's wonderful, I managed to say, forcing a smile. You deserve it. And I meant it, Lucy did deserve every opportunity. But the sting of knowing they'd do for her what they wouldn't even consider for me, that hurt more than I wanted to admit. I pushed the feeling down and focused on my business. That's what I'd always done, work harder, save more, prove myself. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how successful I became, I'd always be the daughter who wasn't worth investing in. Lucy started college that fall, and for the first year, everything seemed fine. My parents were handling the loan payments, and Lucy was loving her finance classes. She'd call me sometimes to tell me about her professors and new friends. But then things started falling apart for my parents. Dad got transferred to a different department at work with a significant pay cut. Mom had been working full-time but developed health issues and could only manage part-time hours. I found out about their problems when they showed up at my salon one evening. I was surprised to see them, they'd never visited my business before. April, we need to talk, Dad said, looking uncomfortable. We're having financial difficulties and struggling to make Lucy's loan payments. We were wondering if you could help us out for a few months, just until we get back on our feet. I stared at them. You want me to help pay for Lucy's college? Just temporarily, Mom said quickly, maybe 6 months at most. $800 a month, Dad added. I looked at my parents, these people who had refused to help me pursue my dreams, now asking me to sacrifice for Lucy's. But Lucy was my sister, and I loved her. Okay, I said, 6 months. But 6 months turned into a year, then 2 years, then 3. Every time I brought up when they'd start paying again, there was another excuse. Dad's hours got cut. Mom's health got worse. The car needed repairs. Just a few more months became their constant refrain. My parents had gotten comfortable with the arrangement. They'd stopped mentioning when they'd take over payments. They'd started asking for help with other things too, their mortgage, groceries, car insurance. Family helps family, Mom would say whenever I hesitated. I felt trapped. I was basically subsidizing my parents' lifestyle while putting my own goals on hold. I could have opened a second location by now, but instead I was funding my sister's degree. The worst part was that none of them seemed to appreciate what I was doing. Dad still made comments about how I should have gone to college instead of playing with nail polish. Mom would introduce me as our daughter who does nails, while Lucy got introduced as our college student studying finance. This went on for 3 years, and my sister successfully graduated from college. I'd paid over $30,000 toward Lucy's education while my own dreams stayed on hold. One day, Lucy called me sounding excited. April, I'm organizing a party to celebrate my graduation from college. I really want you to come. It's going to be at this fancy restaurant downtown. That sounds nice, I said. When is it? Next Saturday evening. I've invited the whole family and some friends. It'll be really special. The very next day, my parents called. Mom's voice was cheerful. April, honey, we need to ask you for money for Lucy's graduation party. Here we go again, I thought. How much? Well, we planned a banquet at this fancy restaurant, and they'd billed us for $3,000 for the reservation and setup. $3,000 for one party. Meanwhile, they'd been crying poverty for 3 years while I paid their bills. We really need your help with this, Dad added. Lucy deserves a proper celebration after all her hard work. I closed my eyes. Fine, I'll pay for the reservation and cover the rest of the bill on the day of the party. Oh, thank you so much, April, you're such a good sister. On the appointed day, I dressed nicely and headed to the restaurant. It was one of those upscale places downtown with white tablecloths and fancy lighting. I walked in and looked for my family. When I found the seating chart, I immediately discovered something that made my stomach drop. I wouldn't be sitting at the main table with Lucy and my parents. Instead, I was assigned to some distant table with people I didn't even know, probably Lucy's college friends or distant relatives. I stared at the seating arrangement for a moment, feeling a familiar sting. But I took it calmly. I didn't really like parties anyway, and I was just planning to congratulate Lucy and leave quickly. The restaurant was packed. Lucy looked beautiful in a new dress, and my parents were dressed up too. Everyone seemed happy and excited. I made my way to my assigned table and sat down with the strangers. When the congratulations began, my parents stood up first. Dad tapped his glass to get everyone's attention. "We want to say how proud we are of Lucy," he announced loudly. "She's the only person in our family who could graduate from college. We're so proud of her. She's smart and beautiful, and she's going to be a successful financier." Everyone applauded. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced myself to clap along. Then Mom stood up, beaming, "We have a special surprise for our graduate." My parents reached into Dad's jacket and pulled out a set of car keys, holding them up for everyone to see. "We bought this car especially for Lucy because she deserves such a gift," Mom announced proudly. I sat there frozen, watching my parents bask in the applause. The car keys glinted under the restaurant lights as they handed them to Lucy, who was practically bouncing with excitement. "This is amazing," Lucy squealed, hugging the keys to her chest. "I can't believe you got me a car." My parents looked so proud, so generous. Like they were the ones who'd made all this possible. I felt sick. Then my father cleared his throat again. "We also want to say something else," he announced, his voice carrying across the room. Unlike her older sister, Lucy did everything right. April never graduated from college. After high school, she started doing some kind of nonsense. The room went quiet. I could feel people at nearby tables turning to look at me. Dad continued, "All decent girls should work in fancy offices, wear white blouses and business suits. Not file clients' nails from morning to evening like some kind of servant." I felt my face burning, my hands gripped the edge of the table. Then Mom laughed, actually laughed, and added, "At least April is of some use though. She sometimes pays our bills." The entire hall erupted in laughter. Guests were chuckling and nodding like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Lucy laughed out loud too, clapping her hands. "Mom and Dad, that was a wonderful toast," Lucy called out, still giggling. I sat there in shock as the laughter continued around me. These people, my own family, had just humiliated me in front of a room full of strangers. They'd reduced 3 years of me sacrificing everything to help them to a casual joke about paying their bills. The shock lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then it was immediately replaced by pure rage. I stood up from my table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The laughter started to die down as people noticed me moving. I walked straight toward the main table where my parents and Lucy were still smiling. "I'd like to say something too," I announced loudly. "I simply have to congratulate my sister." The room fell completely silent. My parents' smiles faltered slightly, but they nodded encouragingly, probably thinking I was going to play along with their little comedy routine. "You're absolutely right, Dad," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room. "I don't have a college degree. I've actually been sawing and varnishing my clients' nails, just like you said." Some people started to shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I often work 7 days a week because I have so much work to do. And you know what? This job that you think is so beneath me allowed me to pay for my younger sister's college tuition for 3 years." The silence in the room was deafening now. I could see my parents' faces starting to change color. "I also have my own business," I continued, looking directly at my father. "I've never taken out any loans, but I've worked hard to achieve everything I have. And now I want to ask everyone present a question." I paused, looking around the room at all the guests who had been laughing at me just moments before. Who is the loser in this case? The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop. My sister's face went bright red. My parents looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. I stood there for another moment, letting the question hang in the air. Then I smiled politely. Thank you all for your attention, I said. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I turned and started walking toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear chairs scraping and people whispering frantically to each other. April, my mother's voice called after me, shrill and panicked. You need to pay for this party at the restaurant. I didn't turn around, I didn't even slow down. I just kept walking straight out the door and into the parking lot. Once I got to my car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The rage was still burning in my chest, but underneath it was something else, relief. For the first time in years, I'd actually stood up for myself. I drove home and immediately turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear from any of them. Not tonight. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone buzzing constantly. Missed calls from Mom, Dad, and Lucy. Text messages that kept coming in every few minutes. I ignored all of them and went to work. My phone kept buzzing all day. Finally, during my lunch break, I checked the messages. Mom had sent about 20 texts, getting increasingly frantic. April, call me back right now. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. I had to pay the rest of the restaurant bill myself. How could you do this to your own family? People are asking questions about what you said. I deleted all the messages without responding. Let them stew in it for a while. This went on for several days. They'd call, I wouldn't answer. They'd text, I'd delete the messages. I focused on my work and tried to process what had happened. Finally, after a week of silence, I answered when Mom called. April, thank God you picked up. We need to talk about what happened at the restaurant. What about it? You set us up, you humiliated Lucy on her special day. But we're willing to forgive you, and we just want to remind you not to forget to pay Lucy's school loan by the end of the month. I actually laughed out loud. Are you serious right now? Of course I'm serious, the payment is due soon. Mom, I'm not paying that loan anymore. Lucy graduated from college. She needs to deal with her own debts now. I've already helped her enough. But April, Lucy is going to need to rent an apartment soon and pay rent. It'll be hard for her to pay the loan and rent at the same time. You should continue to sponsor her. You didn't need to buy her a new car, I said calmly. You could have used that money to pay off part of the loan. But you chose to buy the car instead, so this is your problem now. April, you can't just abandon your family like this. Watch me, I said, and hung up. After that I immediately logged into my bank's personal account and canceled the automatic payment for Lucy's study loan. It felt incredible to click that button, like I was finally taking control of my own life. An hour later, my phone rang again, this time it was Lucy. April, I need to talk to you about what happened at the party. I want to apologize. I didn't mean to humiliate you, and it was an accident. But you really shamed me in front of all my friends and family. I almost laughed. I shamed you? Yes, and I'm ready to forgive you if you continue paying for my loan. Mom told me you canceled the payment. Lucy, I'm definitely not paying for it anymore. But April, I won't be able to pay for my loan. I need to rent an apartment, and you simply have to help me. You're my sister. Her voice was getting higher and more desperate. Lucy, you should turn to your parents for any help from now on, I said calmly, and hung up the phone. A few days later, my parents showed up at my apartment. April, we need to talk, Dad said when I opened the door. You've gone crazy. Lucy is depressed because of you. She hasn't even gotten a job yet, Mom added, pushing past me into my living room. It's going to be very difficult for her to pay her loan. That's not my problem anymore, I said. Dad's face got red. If you don't help your sister, then your mother and I will disown you. I smiled at him. You already disowned me when you humiliated me at that party. And now you can forget not only about me paying Lucy's school loan, but also about me paying half of your mortgage. Their faces went white. I'd been helping them with their mortgage payments for 2 years, covering half of it every month. You can't be serious, Mom whispered. Starting tomorrow, you'll pay the entire mortgage amount yourselves, I said. Now please leave my apartment." After they left, I logged into my banking app and canceled the transfer for their mortgage too. It felt even better than canceling Lucy's loan payment. But my family wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, they enlisted other relatives to call me. My aunt called, begging me not to abandon my parents and sister. My uncle offered to mediate and help us reconcile. Even my grandmother called, telling me that family is everything. "I won't put up with them anymore," I told every single relative who called. I've finally decided not to help them, and that's final. The calls eventually stopped. My family realized I wasn't changing my mind. A few months later, my cousin Sarah called with some news. She wasn't trying to convince me to reconcile, she was just updating me on what was happening. "April, I thought you should know that your parents had to sell Lucy's car. They couldn't afford the car payments, their mortgage, and Lucy's school loan all at the same time." "Really?" I said, though I wasn't surprised. "Yeah, and Lucy got a job at some accounting firm, but she's still living at home because she doesn't have enough money to rent her own place. She's pretty bitter about the whole situation." I felt a small twinge of satisfaction. Maybe now they'd understand what it felt like to struggle financially. "Also," Sarah continued, "Lucy's been posting constantly on social media about how hard it is when your loved ones betray you, and how family is the most important thing in life." I rolled my eyes. Of course she has. I stopped paying attention to Lucy's social media drama because I didn't have time to deal with it. My business was thriving, and for the first time in years, I could actually save money for myself. I also stopped going to family parties and gatherings. I had no desire to see my parents or Lucy, and I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine. If there was a family birthday or holiday, I'd send a polite text declining the invitation. But I noticed something interesting through my cousin Sarah. My parents, who used to only attend parties thrown by our wealthier relatives, suddenly started showing up at every family event, even the small, casual ones they'd previously ignored. "I think they're hoping to run into you at one of these gatherings," Sarah told me during one of our conversations. "They probably want to ambush you into making peace so they can ask for money again." That made perfect sense. My parents had gotten used to my financial support, and now they were scrambling to find a way to get it back. But I had no desire to reconcile with them. Every time I thought about that night at the restaurant, the way they'd humiliated me in front of strangers, the way they'd laughed at my sacrifice, I felt that same anger all over again. Now I was living quietly and peacefully. Without the constant drain of supporting my family, I had money left over every month. Real money that I could use for myself. I started looking into expanding my business. For the first time ever, I was seriously considering opening a second salon. I'd found a perfect location in another part of the city, and I actually had the savings to make it happen. I'd never even thought about expansion before because there was no way to save money when I was constantly helping my parents and sister. Every extra dollar had gone to their bills, their loan payments, their emergencies. But now? Now I could plan for my own future. I spent my evenings researching equipment suppliers and interviewing potential employees. I looked at business loans, not because I needed them, but because I wanted to understand all my options. It felt amazing to make financial decisions based on what I wanted, not what my family needed. The new salon would specialize in high-end services. I'd learned so much over the years about what clients really wanted, and I had ideas for services that none of my competitors were offering. On weekends, I actually had free time. I could sleep in, go shopping, meet friends for coffee. Simple things that most people took for granted, but that I'd never been able to enjoy because I was always working extra hours to cover my family's expenses. I bought new furniture for my apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, purchased with money I'd earned and didn't owe to anyone else. I hung pictures on the walls and bought plants for the windowsills. Small things that made the space feel like a real home instead of just a place to sleep between work shifts. Sometimes I wondered if I'd been too harsh with my family. But then I'd remember my father's words at that party, calling my work nonsense, saying I was filing nails like some kind of servant. I'd remember my mother laughing and reducing 3 years of financial sacrifice to a joke about paying their bills. No, I hadn't been too harsh. If anything, I'd been too generous for too long. My business was doing better than ever. Word had spread about the incident at Lucy's party. Apparently, several guests had been impressed by my speech and looked up my salon. I'd gained new clients who specifically sought me out because they'd heard I was a successful business owner who'd put her family in their place. For the first time in my adult life, I was building something just for me, and it felt incredible.